Alright, so here's this week's weekly Witch Queen campaign mission. It's the Cunning. I'm doing a solo Flawless Master run. And I decided to go with a Sentinel melee build, specifically a Glaive melee build, with the Enigma, the Void Glaive that we got with the release of Witch Queen, as well as Parasite, which you get for beating the Witch Queen campaign, which is one of the, if not the best burst damage exotic heavy weapon in the game. Grand Overture might technically beat it, but it's not as practical. Parasite, you just passively build up Worm's hunger just by getting kills with any weapons or abilities. You just pull out your grenade launcher, check the Worm's hunger. When it's times 20, it's at max, and that gives you like insane amount of damage. So it is even used in some raid encounters like Atrax for Deepstone Crypt. You know, everybody has burst damage supers, burst damage weapons, and Parasite is the favorite, generally speaking. Some people use Grand Overture. But overall, Parasite is the go-to because it just puts out the most amount of damage. And I know from playing with it on Master that times 20 Worm's Hunger will one-shot any champion, as long as you get a stun off first, like on an Unstoppable. So actually, then this was one thing I wanted to test, because I mentioned in a previous video that I was apprehensive about using Weaken Clear with Parasite, because I wasn't sure if the Weaken effect would apply prior to the Worm's times 20 damage. So like if you fire off one Parasite shot and you've spent all that time building up your stacks, you obviously want to nuke whatever's in front of you. And so ideally you would be stacking that with the weakening debuff so that you're adding another 15% damage to your Worms times 20. But because it all happens in one shot from the grenade launcher, I wasn't sure if the 15% weaken would be part of the Worms times 20 blast, or if it would only apply the weakening debuff with that first shot, and then you would only benefit from it from shots thereafter, if that makes any sense. And I'm not using Weaken Clear in this mission, but I am using Unstoppable Grenade Launcher, specifically for Parasite. And I was obviously hoping that I could just, same principle applies, right? So if the Unstoppable was stunned first, one Parasite would nuke the Unstoppable. Like worst case scenario, it would be in finisher range. But it doesn't appear that that you get the stun damage from your first shot, so it's kind of a waste. So I wouldn't. I mean, I made do with it. I mainly kind of wanted to use Parasite and the Enigma just as kind of like a nostalgic, you know, we got Lightfall coming in a couple weeks, and thinking about all the new weapons that we're going to be getting from Lightfall and the new exotics for completing the mission. You know, like the weapons I'm using outside of Hung Jury are kind of just nostalgic to the release of Witch Queen. Like everybody was running around getting to know Glaives because they're a new weapon, and they worked really well for the Witch Queen campaign, especially with all the Void Shields and stuff like that. And they were overpowered as well. Like you can one cycle champions with your Glaive melee, like one stun, and you can just swipe them to death. That's how good they were. Unfortunately, Glaives got nerfed this season, I believe. So that's why I went with a Synthoceps build, because while they did nerf Glaive damage, they buffed, or they made some of the current melee-based exotic armors work with Glaives. which is good. They should, just like they're reworking a whole bunch of exotics to work with like some of the light subclass 3.0 verbs and terms. You know, like we got Sunshot that does like a solar blast damage. Well, why don't they just streamline that into Scorch or an Ignition? You know, like it's just streamlining everything, all the new stuff with the old stuff. So it makes sense, but anyway, so that's why I'm using these two weapons. Hung Jury is for overloads, and I just kind of like, if I get the opportunity where I have to do some range damage, then a scout rifle is a good way to go. And I like the Firefly effect. It's just satisfying. It might not be like the best perk, like I'd rather explosive payload generally because there's no range drop off, but Firefly is pretty fun. So, but primarily Hung Jury is just for the utility of stunning overloads if I need to, and like very limited amount of ranged encounters. And actually I do some damage to the boss with Hung Jury because his Parasite's kind of awkward on the worm boss. But so anyways, about the Glaive Synthoceps build. Synthoceps are basically making Glaives feel like they did before the nerf, so it really wasn't that satisfying to me, because I know how good Glaives were prior to the season, and I haven't played with Glaives much at all this season, so this just kind of felt like Synthoceps weren't really doing anything. But I suppose one would have to test how much damage Glaive melees are doing now versus what they were doing before, and then like how much Biotic enhancements actually adding to it. I obviously noticed the damage go up when Biotic enhancements was procced, but it wasn't like, you know, just running around. Just because I have Synthoceps doesn't mean that I'm always gonna have like crazy Glaive damage. But it was basically enough that if I was surrounded by ads, even if there's a champion in the mix, I can just swipe everything away with a few swipes. Fairly strong. And I almost forgot that we have a Glaive artifact mod. So I'm not using Soul Operative, I'm not using Weak and Clear. I'm using Passive Aggressive Guard, I believe it's called, which gives you damage resistance while you're wielding a Glaive or while you're in battle with a Glaive or something like that. But I was basically, I mean, I don't really see the point to the artifact or to the mod. Like, that's the whole purpose of the shield on the Glaive, is you're basically immune to everything if you're blocking stuff with a shield. So just giving Glaives like more damage resistance just seems redundant, and I don't really know if I actually benefited from it all that much, especially because I had Void Overshields procced most of the time too. But I figured, why not equip it? I haven't seen anybody else really using it, and should I just let the whole season go by without ever using it once? Might as well. And I do believe that it does help. Like, if you're surrounded by ads, you know, you can't always block everything that's right in front of you, and you can't always have your shield up all the time. So that extra damage resistance does come into play, like if you get flanked or whatever. So it's good for that. And then, so what you can do, there's actually some void fragments that synergize well with Glaives, such as Echo of Leeching, which actually works with Glaives. Some like a lot of combat mods don't work with glaives at all, like a lot of the melee based ones, and a lot of fragments don't either, but Echo of Leeching specifically does, which is the fragment that gives you a +10 resilience stat, and it heals you on melee kills. I mean, the description of the fragment, I think, is just heals on melee kills. It doesn't even say charged melee kills. So just in general, especially on Sentinel, on Titan, it's a good perk to go with, because you are using your melee a lot being a Titan, and you do need your resilience to be maxed out. Well, you probably don't need it to be, but you want it to be, because you want uptime on your class ability, you know, outside of just having that extra damage resistance from resilience. And then there's another fragment, I can't remember what it's called, maybe Echo of Exchange. I'm horrible with the fragment names. But there's one that states that melee kills grant grenade energy. So intuitively that would be, you know, a good pick. But I didn't want to test it on my run. Like, I didn't want to take, because I only have 3 fragment slots, and I'm already giving one to Echo of Leeching, so I didn't want to, if I wasn't sure if that other fragment was going to work, I didn't want to waste my time and waste a fragment slot. So I could have tested it, but I didn't have time to, so I just Google searched, you know, does this work with glaives, and I got very little information up front. Like, most of the information came from like the release of Witch Queen, so anything could have happened since then. But I suppose if you spent like half an hour sifting through like Reddits and forum posts and stuff, you can probably find some results from other people's testing. And actually, I think there's a couple people on YouTube that have done some pretty in-depth glaive glaive analysis, or like checking what works with what. So you can look around on YouTube too. But as far as I know, it doesn't work. Like, using your glaive to get melee kills isn't going to grant you grenade energy. So I didn't bother with that. I just went with Echo of Undermining and the extra lingering on the grenades. And I'm using Lord Kelvin's Basilisk so that my grenades can overload enemies, specifically overload champions, obviously. And so this was part of my strat here, was to just kind of bubble nuke some enemies. You get an extra grenade. Every time you pop your bubble, you get all your grenade energy refreshed. So I always throw my grenade first, if I remember to, then drop my bubble, and you got another grenade. And then I'm using Offensive Bulwark instead of Controlled Demolition. So Offensive Bulwark with Bastion are the 2 aspects, and those synergize well because Bastion gives me overshields from my barricades, and Offensive Bulwark it increases your melee damage and your lunge range. I don't think it increases the lunge range for glaives, but it might increase the damage on glaives. Either way, it increases melee damage. But not only that, it also gives you more grenade energy. Like, while you have an overshield, you generate more grenade energy. So it's actually a really good aspect to go with, like, if you're not running Heart of Inmost Light. And actually, I always used to use Offensive Bulwark and Bastion pretty much regardless of like what weapons I was using, just because I always liked the grenade uptime on it, and I like the benefits that you get from overshields. And you do notice a difference when you're not using Offensive Bulwark and you punch stuff, like, you're not getting the same range or damage. Like, with Offensive Bulwark, you really, like, if you're just using your fist and an uncharged melee, your fist is going to glow purple and you're going to lunge pretty far, you're going to do a lot of damage, outright kill whatever's in front of you. And if you're using like melee Wellmaker, you'll actually get wells from just uncharged melee attacks with offensive Bulwark. Kind of like if you're amplified on arc, right? Like you can use melee Wellmaker to get wells from doing amplified uncharged melee attacks. You don't need to use your charged melee all the time. So it works like that with defensive Bulwark as well. But yeah, so this is a fairly easy mission. I would say this is probably the easiest. Maybe this one and the ghosts are the easy. Well, on the arrivals, the first one. But this this part of the mission can actually be a little bit tough if you're not, like, look, I was almost dead right there. These corrupted captains with their void blast, they do a lot of damage to you, and you can get flanked from both sides and swarmed by all the wraiths and ravagers and whatnot. So don't be afraid to just kind of post up with your barricade in the corner. You can actually go like right up above me on this kind of buttress pillar that I'm playing. You can go up on the ledge, and you're completely safe up there. And you can just like toss grenades down or shoot the enemies. But I like playing this pillar here because if I'm like right here, the boss never has an angle on me. He'll never go to the far right side of this room and get an angle on me. On the left, he will, but it's a little bit of a risky play there because the boss can almost one-shot you with his sniper attack, and the glaive can fully absorb his sniper shot if you got your shield up. But if you're in the middle of doing the melee attack on him, and he gets a sniper shot off on you at the same time, like your shield's not up, obviously. And then you can die pretty quick, but he was pretty low, so I just went for it. What else about the build? So I'm using, I have two sources for producing elemental wells, and the elemental wells are basically just to supplement my ability energy. Because I'm not using Heart of Inmost Light, because I'm used to like high uptime on grenades, and grenades are a handy thing to have, especially when you're like fighting champions and you want to go up and melee them with your glaive. Well, you could just have a grenade doing, or melee them with your glaive. Then you can have a grenade doing some work at the same time. So I went with a well build just to get more grenade energy, basically, and barricades so that I can have my overshield as well. So elemental ordnance and reaping Wellmaker, and those are the only two melee abilities that I'm actually using anyway, so it actually works out perfect. I'm always using my barricade, I'm always using my grenade, and I'm using bountiful wells and seeking wells. So every time I do a grenade kill, or every kill after I put my barricade down, 2 void wells are going to drop, and then they're going to come to me, and I'll pretty much have my abilities back to where they were. I'm not coupling all that with any damage buffs or anything like that. I figured, because I don't even know like if high energy fire stacks with the glaive melee build. I don't think Font of Might does, because like you're not actually doing void damage with the melee. That's pretty fun. But yeah, so just wells to get my energy back, and then Synthoceps is, you know, that's basically the build. Just go and hit stuff with my stick and try to kill him. And then if a target is too far out at range that I can't get to, I got Hung Jury, and I got Parasite for priority targets. So I was actually, normally when I do this, I always consider the boss, because the boss is a pain. Like after he does his arc blast attack, you have like 2-3 seconds where you gotta shoot his mouth when it's red specifically. That's the only time you can do damage. So I did realize that if I went with Parasite, then I wasn't going to be using Parasite on the boss. I could have tried to, but by the time a Parasite gets there, because it's so slow traveling, and because of the arc on the like due to the velocity, like the chances of me actually getting a hit on the boss with a Parasite is so low that it wouldn't be worth wasting ammo, let alone like worms times 20. So I wasn't even gonna try. But like normally I would use like a linear fusion rifle. Leviathan's Breath would be good. You know, even a rocket launcher would be better than Parasite, but still not ideal. Machine gun would be alright too. But I was actually surprised that Hung Jury was doing as much damage as like, it's not a tanky boss by any means. So, but still, like, Hung Jury actually was taking his health down pretty significantly. See, so this is the thing, like, obviously you can't go up and glaive Screebs or you're just gonna die. But you can just hold your shield up and let them explode in front of you and survive it because of the shield. And then if you really wanted, you know, for extra measure, throw your barricade down and get an overshield going at the same time. Then they're going to be like blinded by the barricade. You're going to be super tanky, basically invincible, and you can just let them all kill themselves. So what I was going to say is, because I was using Hung Jury to damage the boss, I actually learned something about the spawns in this boss fight, which was useful to know, because depending on what build you're using, what subclass and all that, this can be a pretty tough boss fight. Not because of the boss, it's because of all the adds. So, and because the boss's health portions, like his health is divided into 3, because he's squishy, like you can just like one-shot him with like or two-shot with a linear, like a whole, and then he's immune. Well, you're actually spawning in more waves than you needed to, because there's like 3 spawn points of adds per health phase of the boss. And they don't all spawn at the same time. They don't all spawn when the boss goes immune. Like, they spawn progressively, which I didn't even know, because I've always just kind of nuked the boss until he was immune every time I've done this. And if you use kind of a weaker build, just because you feel like using something different for the fun factor, or the challenge factor, whatever, this can be an overwhelming boss fight, because you get like, all of a sudden there's going to be like literally 100 Screeb coming at you, and the ones at the front are tanky yellow bar Screeb that you can't just like one-shot, and then you got the ogres at the same time that are blasting arc from long range. Like, it's super easy to die in this boss fight if you just constantly nuke the boss and you don't have a super good build. But because I was using Hung Jury and taking his health down so much slower, I actually noticed all the waves of adds that spawned in. Like, I heard, and I didn't know that they spawned progressively. So it actually made it easier to deal with the waves of adds, like way easier. Because basically, if you nuke his health bar down, you're getting 3 times. You're getting 3 waves of adds all at once instead of just 1 at a time. So for this part here, the only thing I have to consider is the 2 overloads at the end. If you do this on legend difficulty, there's never 2 overloads together, I don't think. It's always 1 overload and like a ultra, like with a shield, like a void shield, or it might even be like an arc or a solar shield on legend. But on a master, it's always 2 overloads. And so right at the end, 2 overloads. And you're on a timer right now to escape the suffocating haze. So if you don't get out in time, then you die. You lose the mission. You got to start over. So you can catch them spawning here. You can get a stun off with a grenade, or with collateral from like explosive head on a scout, and then you can just nuke them with Parasite. So I make sure that I have Parasite ready to go for the overloads, preferably like ×20. If not, I also have my super, so I could have got a stun off, dropped a bubble over him, and glaved him to death. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.